I am undeniably the fiercest apex predator in all the Taihang Mountains. Yet, in the hearts of the people, I am revered as the guardian spirit of these peaks, all because, over 100 years ago, the flood from my heavenly tribulation almost wiped out the village below. When I realized it, with a mere thought, I drove the heavy rains away. And because of that, the people caught a clear glimpse of my massive, coiled silhouette in the distance. They didn't dare call me a mere snake. They could only cry out to me as a god. The torrential rains stopped, and the flash floods receded. I raised my head, gave them one last look, and vanished deep into the Taihang Mountains. From then on, they called me the mountain god. After the flood, the villagers even built a dedicated temple, and began worshipping a statue of a coiled serpent. In the blink of an eye, a century has passed. Now, the very last villager who knows I exist is on his deathbed, with a heavy heart, wanting to say goodbye to an old friend. Quietly slipped into a pond near the village. Even though there is absolutely nothing in this land that can threaten me, I know all too well the terrifying greed of humans. So, I've always stayed hidden. But right now, Lin Yushang is fading fast. His time is almost up. He lay back in his bamboo chair, gently tapping the armrest. His mind drifted back to the mountain god. When that apocalyptic flood struck all those years ago, he was only 20 years old, but he could never forget the god's massive, coiled body, and those piercing golden eyes. Yet, since that day, he had never laid eyes on the mountain god again. And now, he is the only one left in the village who knows the truth. He wondered, after he was gone, would the villagers still keep offering prayers at the temple built for the mountain god? Just as he let out a heavy sigh, the farm animals suddenly went frantic, dogs barking wildly. Sensing something, Lin Yushang forced himself up, and slowly walked to the stream behind his yard. Seeing my old friend, I rose straight from the water, revealing my true form. Gazing down at this dying old man, my long-dormant heart actually felt a flicker of emotion. Once this frail man passes away, there truly will be no one left in this world who remembers me. Lin Yushang shakily raised his hands, as if wanting to embrace me, but when I lowered my massive head, the old man didn't hug me. Instead, he dropped to his knees and bowed deeply. He never lifted his head again. Seeing this, I couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Honestly, I don't know what makes me so worthy of his worship. I don't know how much time passed before Lin Yushang finally, slowly raised his head. The mountain god had long since vanished, but right there on the ground lay a glowing, crimson scale, the size of a newborn baby. After my final farewell with Lin Yushang, I followed the riverbed away from the village. Soon enough, I returned to my sanctuary. It was a vast, quiet lake, and the massive tree on the island at its center has been my home for the past 200 years. As I dragged my heavy body ashore, the waters churned and crashed against my colossal frame. I slithered up the ancient tree. Just then, a few rays of sunlight pierced through the canopy, shimmering against my scales, making my entire serpent body look radiant and crystalline. Then, I rested on the thick branches and fell into deep thought. I don't really know what I am. Maybe I'm just a monster. Or maybe some mythical beast from ancient legends. For over 200 years in these Taihang Mountains, I've never met another of my kind, nor have I ever sensed anything stronger than myself. So, I've roamed as the unchallenged lord of this mountain for nearly 2 centuries. At first, I was perfectly fine with just coasting through my life as a snake. But that disaster a century ago completely changed how I saw things. That catastrophe actually gave me a new lease on life. It even tied my very soul to this mountain. And the creatures here, they don't see me as a predator anymore, but rather the true guardian of the Taihang Mountains. Lately, I've had this nagging feeling that something huge is coming. And that feeling has only been getting stronger and stronger. But no matter how much I rack my brain, I just can't put my finger on it. But hey, no matter what happens, I am the biggest wildcard in this mountain anyway. Lost in those thoughts, I drifted off to sleep. My massive scaly body slowly coiled up tight. Meanwhile, tens of miles away at the edge of a village, Lin Yushang's son, Lin Zhijiang, dragged his feet as he walked in. He'd been hustling in the capital for over a decade, but instead of making it big, he'd racked up hundreds of thousands in gambling debts. Honestly, he should have ended up dead in that casino. But as luck would have it, the casino boss had been obsessing over local folklore lately. And right then, Zhijiang remembered the wild tales of the mountain god his old man used to tell. Thanks to that legend, He managed to buy himself a little time. The boss actually let him go, just to track down clues about the mountain god. And if he comes up empty-handed, well, Zhejiang already knew exactly how he'd end up. He quickly pushed open the door to his house. The second he stepped inside, a bone-chilling cold washed over him. He yelled out his wife's name, but all he got was dead silence. It felt like every single thing in that house was completely lifeless. Suddenly, his eyes caught something. His voice instantly caught in his throat. In a flash, time shifted to the dead of night. Back on the quiet island in the middle of Qingshan Lake, a tiny white fox suddenly appeared. She was literally walking on the water, heading straight for the center of the island, trembling at the terrifying, mountain-like presence radiating from the core. She knew it, she had finally found the one she was looking for. Once she crossed the lake and stepped onto the shore, she was terrified to realize that all sound had completely vanished. Up in the massive camphor tree ahead of her, the bark seemed to twist into the shape of a massive serpent. Then, a thunderous roar shattered the silence right above her. That was followed by the eerie sound of heavy scales scraping against the wood. The white fox couldn't help but stumble back a few steps in fear. I was coiled up in the branches, just staring down at this little fox. Honestly, the second she showed up on the ridge across the lake, I already knew she was there. I just couldn't figure out how she managed to walk across the water and make it all the way here. Could it be that things are already starting to shift? It was like the fox knew exactly what I was thinking. Suddenly, her body started glowing, wrapped in this hazy, ethereal white light. A second later, a beautiful woman in flowing white robes stood right where the fox had been. Without missing a beat, she bowed deeply and spoke, "Lord of the Taihang Mountains, forgive this humble fox for daring to use cheap illusions in your presence. I beg for your forgiveness." Ha, another title treating me like some mountain god. It's one thing when humans call me that, sure, but why is this spiritual fox calling me that too? Seeing that I wasn't saying a word, the woman in white spoke up again, her voice shaking. Could you travel to the northern peaks of Taihang?" I didn't answer her. I just stayed coiled high up in the tree, staring down at her in complete silence. Seeing my reaction, she pressed on. "There is a ferocious tiger awakening there." Alright, now I finally got it. I knew exactly what she was getting at. She wanted me to go to the northern peaks and stop that monstrous tiger from waking up. My massive crimson body stayed wrapped around the branches, completely motionless. I didn't give her a yes. The tiger's awakening is just nature taking its course, and I really don't feel I have the right to interfere. I mean, do you know how massive the Taihang Mountains are? I've been here for 200 years and I still haven't explored it all. If other creatures out there are getting stronger, well, that's just the mountain's will. Besides, there's absolutely no way that tiger is the only thing waking up out there. Does that mean I have to go and kill every single one that shows up? Awe for nature is the enlightenment I've gained as a great serpent. Seeing that I gave no response, the woman pleaded again. Once that fierce beast descends the mountain, it's going to slaughter every human it sees. Please, I'm begging you to save him. At her words, I slowly lowered my slender neck from the shadows of the ancient tree. My blood jade scales flared and closed in rhythm with my heavy breaths. The woman in white felt completely overwhelmed by a voice that echoed like roaring metal. As my gaze fell upon her, a violent shudder racked her entire body. A ferocious tiger on the loose, bent on slaughter. I truly cannot just sit back and watch. Slaughtering innocent people is one thing, but an awakened creature stirring up trouble is quite another. Humanity's torrent of steel and weapons is not something flesh and blood can withstand. If this beast causes a massive disaster and draws the terrifying attention of humans, it would only drag me down and force me to flee these mountains. Meanwhile, far to the north of the Taihang Mountains, a massive tiger was roaring at the heavens, its fur blazing like liquid fire. Its pitch-black stripes made it look like a vicious demon straight out of hell. Right now, it stood tall, glaring coldly at the distant valley, the home of the humans. As its breathing grew heavier, its bones and muscles began to brutally twist and contort. It felt as if invisible chains were snapping inside its body. It knew its metamorphosis had begun. Once it fully shattered these shackles, it could embark on a path of absolute power, and finally take its revenge. Once, deep within the Taihang Mountains, even though tigers were rare, they were incredibly powerful. They were meant to be the true kings of these peaks. But then, out of nowhere, they were all wiped out. When it was just a tiny cub, it watched helplessly as hunters dragged away its mother's lifeless body. Its siblings had pounced in a desperate attempt to save her, but they only ended up as extra tiger skins for the hunters. Barely survived by sheer luck, only to realize it was the very last tiger left in these mountains. So, it made a blood vow. If it could just break these shackles and grow stronger, it would slaughter every single human it laid eyes on. Right now, the mutation was at its most critical stage. The raging blood in its veins boiled over, converting into pure, raw fuel to forge its new body. The beast let out an agonizing roar to the heavens. A split second later, a deafening bolt of lightning crashed down from the sky. The lightning struck the tiger dead center. After what felt like an eternity, the dark clouds finally parted. Bathed in the pale moonlight, the beast's deep, mangled scars began to heal at an impossible speed. In this very moment, the blood coating its body was no longer a sign of weakness, but a glorious crown, marking its ascent as a true king. Its evolution was complete. The ferocious tiger felt boundless, terrifying power surging through its veins. It was finally time for revenge. With that burning thought, it charged toward the human village without a second of hesitation. But suddenly, it heard the heavy crashing of water. The very next second, a colossal, crimson serpent reared its massive head from the depths, glaring down at the newly evolved beast standing before me. I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Thank goodness I made it in time. Otherwise, these mountains would have been completely doomed. Meanwhile, the white fox beside me looked torn with anxiety. This fierce tiger had once saved her from hunters, making it her true savior. That was exactly why she had come desperately begging to me. Because she knew, if that tiger was allowed to go on a killing spree against humans, it would inevitably bring about its own eternal doom. Right now, the tiger could feel it too. An absolutely crushing, mountain-like pressure radiating from me, even though it didn't know why I was here. When two apex predators refuse to back down, there is only one path left. A bloody fight to the death. So, it charged at me without hesitation. But in just a split second, my massive body locked it down tight. Looking at the little tiger still struggling endlessly, I actually felt a long-lost hunger. But just as I opened my giant jaws, ready to swallow it whole, the white fox suddenly spoke up, crying out to me, "Please, mountain god, spare his life." Hearing this, I turned my head to look at her. My twisted, serpentine face showed nothing but cold indifference. The white fox knew I was waiting for her to speak. So, she hurriedly recounted every detail of her past with this fierce tiger. I knew the fox was afraid I'd just eat the tiger right then and there. So, I was also waiting for her to offer a price high enough to make me give up this bloody meal. Seeing my reaction, the white fox understood instantly. With a solemn face, she declared, "I am willing to trade the path I have walked for his survival." Hearing this, I first glanced at the fierce tiger, then turned back to carefully study the white fox in front of me. Before I even had the chance to speak, an indescribable feeling suddenly welled up in my heart. Right then, the white fox let out a soft chuckle. Then, she recited a string of words to me. This was exactly the path she spoke of. The fierce tiger roared from the sidelines, desperately trying to stop her. Even though the two beasts had only met once, why was the white fox willing to sacrifice her life for him? The mountains were silent and gentle. I clearly hadn't agreed to this trade, yet she still chose to do it anyway. Mountain god is just a title to me. Returning to the mountains is the same as returning to the natural cycle of order. After the white fox finished speaking, spots of white light began to glow on her body, and then she collapsed to the ground, falling unconscious. But shockingly, her dissipating white light didn't scatter across the wilderness. Instead, it showered over me, this colossal crimson beast. The moment the faint white glimmer touched my blood-red scales, it was like a drop of water merging into the vast ocean. In that moment, I understood. The mountains had answered the white fox's plea, and I was the walker of the mountains. After a moment of silence, I finally spoke to the fierce tiger, "If you still choose to slaughter innocent creatures, I will not stop you anymore. But her path will also be ruined for nothing." At that moment, the fierce tiger's terrifying aura completely vanished. He just lowered his head, silently watching the deeply sleeping white fox beside him. Then, I added, "As long as you don't slaughter the innocent." Hearing this, the fierce tiger froze for a second. He quickly realized what I meant, and a look of deep gratitude revealed itself in his eyes. I softly murmured, "White tiger. That is the name she gave you." After saying that, I turned around and dove back into the river. I still had somewhere to be right now. I had no time to play house with a little kitty. The fox's memories told me that awakened creatures generally need a medium. It's the crucial key to unlocking the path of awakening. And the place where the fox lived had exactly that kind of medium plant. She only managed to awaken after devouring its fruit when the medium had fully ripened. But in my own memory, I had never eaten any so-called medium before. So, I really wanted to go see for myself what on earth that medium actually was. Meanwhile, on the other side, Lin Zhijiang had also discovered his old man's dead body, along with the scale I had given to Lin Yusheng. Lin Zhijiang paid absolutely no mind to his father's stiff corpse. Instead, he cradled that scale with a look of pure, wild ecstasy. Staring at the palm-sized scale in his hands, he knew his own life was saved. The god of the Taihang Mountains actually existed. Following that, he dug out a book from somewhere in the house. That book was written by Lin Yusheng in his early years, and its contents were entirely about the records of the mountain god. After finding exactly what he came for, Lin Zhijiang hastily buried his old man in the backyard. He then cleared out all the family's money, grabbed his things, and left the village without looking back. One day later, in the imperial capital, at this exact moment, on the top floor of a high-rise building, a man draped in a black overcoat stood gazing down at the city's night skyline. Behind him, a young girl was carefully examining that mysterious scale. After a moment, Bai Xiaoxiao finally spoke. The owner of this scale is an awakened being, and not just any, it's one of the absolute strongest out there right now. At that, Bai Yan chimed in. The researchers under my command said, the creature this belongs to might be a massive snake, somewhere between 20 and 25 meters long. They also tested its durability with guns, and it's off the charts. Blasting it with heavy artillery is basically just exfoliating its dead skin. Look, we're just here to find the catalyst. There's no need to pick a fight with a monster like that. Hearing this, a silver light practically spilled out from the girl's eyes. But why aren't you thinking about the big picture? A catalyst capable of creating an existence like that. Just imagine how absolutely incredible it must be. The man fell silent for a moment before turning around. Once Bai Xiaoxiao set her sights on something, she would bleed herself dry just to get her hands on it. This was a side effect of consuming an unripe catalyst. When she was just a child, the emotions she lost could never be restored, and ultimately, they twisted into a terrifying obsession. Knowing this, he sighed helplessly. I'll give you half of my men to take with you. Is that enough? The girl chuckled softly. With that, I'm 80% sure we'll get it. Meanwhile, deep within a cave in the Taihang Mountains, I was coiled up on a massive, smooth boulder in the ravine. Quietly waiting, right in front of me, a deep blue flower bud was slowly maturing. This was the catalyst from the fox's memories. Back then, she had eaten one of them, and left this one behind to fully ripen. At this point, I was absolutely certain. I had never consumed a catalyst before, but it was obvious that these catalysts were the vital key to awakening. As the strongest entity in the entire Taihang Mountains, it was ironic that I didn't even know what I actually was. The information I had was just too limited. Aside from knowing how to fight, I was practically clueless about everything else. Since I wasn't entirely sure if a creature was only allowed to consume one specific catalyst, I held back and didn't just swallow it on impulse. My plan was to wait for this flower to fully bloom, then scour the mountains for other catalysts to compare it with. Lost in these thoughts, I coiled tightly around the rock and drifted back to sleep. A few days later, at the entrance to the Taihang Mountain village, Lin Zhijiang had returned, bringing dozens of men with him, but this time, the villagers didn't give him a warm welcome. The village deeply valued tradition, and yet his old man had been dumped in a shallow dirt grave. No coffin, no headstone, and absolutely no funeral. To them, this was the ultimate disrespect and betrayal. Lin Zhijiang never expected to set foot here again either, much less understand why the Bai family specifically wanted him as their guide. But then again, whenever he thought about that massive payout, the kind of money that would keep him living like a king for the rest of his life, he just kept his mouth shut. As soon as they entered the village, Bai Xiaoxiao suddenly looked up, gazing at the massive mountains in the distance. A few seconds later, her face went totally blank again. Right around that time, I was just waking up too. With perfect timing to witness the catalyst fully maturing, I watched as that deep blue bud finally blossomed, looking a bit like a daffodil, while releasing a bone-chilling, freezing white mist into the air. Over the last few days, Plenty of wild beasts had come prowling around, but the moment they sensed I was here, they all wisely backed off and left. I slowly lowered my head, took a gentle sniff of its sweet fragrance, and then turned away, leaving the cave behind. I could have chosen to take this spiritual plant, but I didn't. The mountains nourish me, but they also nourish other life. To me, this plant might just be something nice to have, but to another creature out there, it could be their only chance at survival. Keeping all the benefits to myself would be way too greedy. That's not the law of nature. It's just my own personal code. When I got back to the old camphor tree on the island in the center of the lake, I found the white tiger lying on the grass, licking his paws. Seeing him, I looked completely puzzled and asked, "How did you find this place? Do you actually know me?" Hearing this, the white tiger looked a bit surprised and replied, "Master of the Taihang Mountains. Is there a single creature in these mountains who doesn't know who you are?" Then, he told me, "Even though your resting place is pretty well hidden, it's not much of a secret to us awakened beasts. I hope you'll be a bit more careful from now on." I politely thanked him, and then asked what brought him here. The white tiger spoke up, "A group of uninvited guests just entered the mountains recently. They're probably coming for you. The guy leading them carries your scent." Hearing this, my serpentine face tightened slightly. I asked coldly, "What do you think their chances of winning are?" The white tiger shook his massive head first, then said, "On paper, absolutely zero. But the girl leading the group, she gives off a vibe that makes me deeply uncomfortable. If they dare to march this deep into the mountains, they must have some kind of trump card." I smiled silently to myself. Even though I had been careful enough, I still ended up attracting the greedy eyes of humans. Well, since that's the case, I have no choice but to strike first. After saying goodbye to the white tiger, I quietly slithered closer to the village. Hiding in the shadows, I observed this group of intruders. The scent the white tiger had mentioned was actually the scale I had given to the old man earlier. And right then, I recognized Lin Jijiang. Naturally, I wasn't going to just sit and wait for them to come to me. Ambushing is a basic instinct for any snake. Before I became an apex predator, I survived purely by patiently waiting for my prey. Step right into my kill zone. As soon as those dozens of men entered the mountains, they pulled out professional military gear. They even strapped on bulletproof vests. On top of that, each of them was carrying a wooden box on their back. I guess this was one of the trump cards giving them the guts to enter the mountains, because they were heading straight for my resting place. Right now, my attention was no longer on these men. Instead, I locked my eyes onto the girl in the black dress, who was surrounded by those bulky guys. Her aura was completely different from a normal human's. This had to be their second trump card. But all of this was still far from enough. My eyes turned icy and fierce. Terrifying muscles coiled beneath my massive body, and I vanished from my spot in an instant. They never should have come to these mountains, because this has always been my hunting ground. Intruders here only have one way out: death. The deeper they trekked into the mountains, the darker it got. Ever since they stepped foot in the forest, a dark cloud of dread had been hanging over Lin Jijiang's head. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him from the shadows. He shook his head hard, forcing himself to snap out of it. Even if that giant snake was as magical as the stories claimed, it definitely couldn't stop a bullet. In this world, there was no living creature that modern firearms couldn't take down. As Lin Jijiang thought about this, he actually felt a bit more at ease. But the mountain wind was getting colder and colder. Suddenly, the bright, sunny sky unleashed a heavy downpour. Bai Xiaoxiao's expression instantly turned dead serious. She knew that the entity had arrived. And then, a deafening roar of thunder suddenly shattered the sky. Thousands of tons of rain poured down on the mountains, instantly blurring everyone's vision. Dread in Lin Jijiang's heart completely exploded. He swore he could hear something growling low in the heavy rain. But Bai Xiaoxiao didn't even notice his twisted face. Her eyes were locked on a dark corner of the downpour. A massive red creature was slowly rising through the curtain of rain. Everyone could hear the metallic grinding of its massive scales shifting. And when they locked eyes with those glowing, molten gold irises, it felt like an entire mountain was crushing down on their spines. After a moment of paralyzed shock, someone finally snapped. They opened fire. The pitch-black muzzles spat out roaring flames, sending bullets ripping straight into the torrential rain. But as the gunfire raged on, the group realized in sheer terror, their comrades were disappearing, one by one. It was as if the rain itself had turned into a monster, silently swallowing them whole. Lin Zhizheng collapsed to the ground, sobbing and clutching his head. With zero combat training, the overwhelming pressure had completely broken him. But the girl? She acted like nothing was wrong. She opened her arms wide toward the giant red shadow, as if trying to embrace the terrifying beast. I really like you. Can you stop throwing a tantrum now? I'll take you away from here. But after making her offer, the girl noticed. The beast wasn't stopping at all. A look of sharp annoyance instantly crossed her face. You are my pet now. Come with me. The only answer she got was an eerie, booming laugh. A laugh that sounded like rolling thunder trapped in its throat. At the exact same moment, the storm raged even harder. Seeing this, Bai Xiaoxiao dropped her smile. Her face went completely cold as she muttered, if you won't listen, you're gonna suffer. The creature answered by revealing its true form, the Crimson Dragon. As its massive tail slammed into the ground, the girl leapt up, landing gracefully on its scales. Right then, a brilliant, glowing silver light flared deep within Bai Xiaoxiao's eyes. Her delicate face turned dead serious as she slowly chanted in an ancient, forgotten tongue. She whispered, with my sword, I shall bury your kind. As soon as the words left her lips, the wooden cases strapped to the men's backs exploded wide open. Dozens of ancient swords shot straight into the sky, tearing right through the heavy curtain of rain. They swarmed together, hovering right behind the girl. The blades were vibrating violently, as if they were absolutely starving for the taste of flesh and blood. Bai Xiaoxiao stared blankly at the giant red serpent in the rain. She looked at it like it was already a corpse. A split second later, the dozens of ancient swords transformed into deadly spears under her command. They shot straight for the serpent's head, but that monstrous face, hidden behind a red-eyed demon mask, was filled with pure mockery in the burning golden light. I arched my massive body and coiled up tight. With every breath, my scales slowly flared open from top to bottom. The moment the sharp ancient blades slammed against my scales, a deafening screech of metal echoed through the air. These ancient swords look intimidating, but they're nothing but a joke. Seeing this, Bai Xiaoxiao frowned. This thing was way stronger than she had ever expected. Even though none of these ancient swords were ordinary weapons, their razor-sharp edges couldn't even leave a single scratch on my scales. At this point, Bai Xiaoxiao was already thinking about retreating. Facing an unbeatable monster, she wasn't stupid enough to just stand there and die. But right at that moment, it finally hit her. They were completely cut off from the rest of the world. Every single drop of rain was sealing off the area. They were never the hunters to begin with. They were just toys, meant for the king's amusement. Bai Xiaoxiao hadn't been in such a pathetic state for a long time. Since she couldn't escape, then she'd just have to fight to the death. She casually waved her hand. The very next second, those ancient swords actually changed direction and started attacking her own subordinates. She was using them as a blood sacrifice for the swords. The people cut down by the ancient blades turned into dried-up mummies in the blink of an eye. Lin Zhizheng huddled against a smooth tree stump. His tears and snot mixed together. In his eyes, the whole world had gone completely insane. Suddenly, not far away, came the sickening sound of a sharp weapon piercing straight through a chest. A few drops of warm blood even splattered onto the dirt right in front of the terrified man's eyes. Lin Zhizheng looked up on instinct, only to realize that Bai Xiaoxiao had already been impaled by a glowing red bone spike. Right through her chest, she was dead, killed by her own foolish ignorance. Slowly, the heavy rain came to a stop. The people who had entered the mountain with Lin Zhizheng had all completely vanished. He just sat there, huddled in a daze, absolutely terrified to move a single muscle. Lin Zhizheng couldn't even help but wonder, did the mountain god of the Taihang Mountains actually spare his life? The very next second, he ran like a madman, desperately searching for his old man. Sudden heavy rainfall has hit the areas surrounding the Taihang Mountains. Citizens are advised to stay indoors and stay safe. Meanwhile, inside the black crystal skyscraper, a man with a blank expression clicked the TV remote. Then, he turned around and looked behind him, scanning the room full of seated people. These were all the powerful elders of the Bai family. Some were slouched back in their chairs. Some were even hooked up to oxygen tubes. They had all come here today, just to interrogate Bai Yan and hold him accountable. Because Bai Xiaoxiao, the strongest of the Bai family's new generation, had gone missing. An old man leaning on a walking cane looked at him with icy eyes, speaking in a heavy tone. Xiao Xiao is an incredibly important figure to us. How could you, at such a critical moment, just let her go to the Taihang Mountains? Now we don't even know if she's dead or alive. Bai Yan could only keep his head down and take the scolding, not daring to show even the slightest hint of annoyance on his face. Just then, another elder spoke up to calm him down. Old Four, take it easy. Don't make yourself sick from anger. We all know what Yan is capable of. Otherwise, we wouldn't have dared to hand the family business over to him. As soon as he finished, Bai Yan's own grandfather asked in a stern voice. When Xiao Xiao went to the Taihang Mountains, she took the complete set of the 33 absolute swords. Didn't she? The moment he said this, the rest of the elders were totally shocked. If she really had the absolute swords in her hands, then they probably didn't need to worry too much about her safety after all. Seeing their reactions, Bai Yan didn't dare waste another second. He quickly explained the whole story from beginning to end. After hearing him out, the old men all let out a collective sigh of relief. Perhaps, Bai Xiao Xiao had just stumbled upon a lucky encounter in the mountains. Then, Bai Yan continued, the Song family and the Li family already have people who know that Xiao Xiao went to the Taihang Mountains. And right after that, terrifying mutations started happening in those mountains. Now they are putting pressure on us. Should we reveal this information to them? After discussing it for a bit, the group decided it was fine to leak a little bit of information. But exactly how much to say was completely up to Bai Yan. Right at this moment, I was leisurely coiling myself around an old camphor tree. The Taihang Mountains being sealed off, that was entirely my doing. Because over the last few days, more and more outsiders had been coming into these mountains. Even though I've been pouring down heavy rain for days now, quite a few teams still managed to break through my stormy blockade. And that didn't just include people from the Bai family. People from the Li and Song families of the capital city were here, too. Thinking about all this, I let out a long, heavy breath. New era of global awakening had begun. Awakened creatures drawing the attention of humans was a completely normal thing. It's just that all of this was happening way too fast. So far, the humans have only sent out ordinary people. But who knows, stronger awakened might show up sooner or later. That girl had already come quite far on her path. There's no telling if even more formidable foes will show up. At that thought, I focused my mind. Suddenly, dozens of ancient swords shot up from the muddy ground of the island, circling and gathering around the old camphor tree. After Bai Xiao Xiao died, these ancient swords naturally became my spoils of war. Over the past few days, I've been nourishing them with my own snake blood. Empowered by my blood, these little guys have grown terrifyingly strong. I can actually feel their excitement. After all, they haven't tasted fresh blood and flesh in 1,000 years. For fierce swords forged purely for slaughter, that kind of thirst is absolute torture. And right at that moment, the rain brought me a message. An awakened had just led a group of people deep into the mountains. But they weren't coming for me. They were heading straight for Mount Wutai. Meanwhile, at the Mount Wutai temple, an endless, heavy rain was pouring down. The abbot, draped in a crimson and gold robe, chanted a quiet prayer. He spoke softly, "Death is like a snuffed-out lamp. My condolences, patron." Hearing this, Bai Yan, who sat across from him, instantly clenched his fists, his face turning grim in a split second. Beside him, the old man in white kept a calm, silent gaze. He showed absolutely no sign of joy or anger. The abbot of this ancient temple had been deeply close friends with the old man in their youth. Using a mystical Buddhist art, he had once left an everlasting lamp here in the temple. That lamp was tied to Bai Xiao Xiao's life force, but right now, the extinguished flame made one thing completely clear. Bai Xiao Xiao had died in the Taihang Mountains, having finally gotten the answer they came for. The grandfather and grandson silently walked out of the temple's main hall, but right at that moment, the abbot's voice echoed behind them. Amidst the pouring mountain rain, he warned, "This rain carries the spirit of that entity. Leave this place as quickly as you can. Do not harbor thoughts of vengeance. Only then will you stay safe." The old man stopped in his tracks. Then, with a loud, ringing voice, he replied, "This place may be a sanctuary, but we have no reason to linger. Rest assured, master. Once we leave, we will return in just a few days to easily settle everything once and for all." A few more days slipped by. Lately, more and more people have been trespassing into the Taihang Mountains. They were ruthlessly destroying the forest, gunning down innocent creatures, and looting every spiritual item they could get their hands on. Coiled up on that familiar old tree, I felt a rare, lingering sense of exhaustion. I took all those greedy, wicked fools, and buried every single one of them right here in this soil. As for the ancient swords, they were already soaked in thick, unyielding layers of blood. Eventually, even a terrifyingly powerful old man managed to track me down. The old man fought me in a long, grueling battle, but in the end, he was struck down by my ancient swords. He was the clan elder of the Bai family. That's why he made sure to leave an out for his family. Once he had settled all his affairs back home, he came here as an elder, seeking revenge for his descendant. He came fully prepared. Since he lost, there was nothing left to say. After I die, no one in the Bai family will ever speak the name Bai Xiaoxiao. Nor will anyone remember my name. Let all of this bitter resentment die with me. If you still feel wronged, if your fury remains unquenched, and you believe my Bai family has offended you too deeply, then go ahead. Wipe out our entire bloodline. I will not harbor a single ounce of resentment. After the old man closed his blood-stained eyes, he breathed out his final words. For the last time, I pay my respects to you, mountain god. If you'll still listen to an old man's advice, leave this place as soon as you can. This place is a vortex of trouble. You won't be able to hold it. Thinking about this, I let out another heavy sigh. My spirit flows within this rain. But this energy isn't endless, even with the backing of the mountains. Keeping this rainstorm going is getting harder and harder. Even though they know they can't make it out of these mountains alive, they just keep coming in waves, spending such a massive amount of manpower and resources. It's pure madness. What on earth are the people behind all this plotting? That old man's dying warning weighed heavily on my mind like a dark cloud. The Taihang Mountains are a magnet for disaster. I can't hold them, but why was he so sure I'd fail? Sure, the Bai family from the capital retreated, but the number of intruders swarming the mountains is only growing. I can even sense an awakened blue phoenix from the outside world, lying low deep within these mountains. It's as if these mountains are hiding something that drives the outside world absolutely crazy. Everyone is desperate to break in, yet someone actually told me to run away. I just can't wrap my head around it. What exactly are they after? Right at that moment, the white tiger walked up to my old camphor tree. Then, it viciously tossed the man hanging from its jaws right at the base of the trunk. The tiger started licking the fur on its front legs. Felines have never been fans of the rain, and having its coat soaked made it incredibly grumpy. The man had dropped face planted straight into the mud, looking completely pathetic. He had clearly never been treated like this before. He immediately roared, "You damn monster. If you let me go right now, I might just spare your life when we wipe out these mountains. Otherwise, I'll skin you alive and turn you into a rug." Hearing that, a murderous glare instantly flashed in the white tiger's eyes. It crouched, ready to rip the man to shreds. But right then, I spoke up. "Who is coming to wipe out the mountains?" The man was suddenly crushed by a terrifying pressure. The heavy force pinned him face down, suffocating him in the thick mud. He suddenly remembered the warning his clan elders gave him, the one thing he was told to watch out for. The crimson snake they called the mountain god. That was me, revealing my true form from within the massive tree. I stared down at him and slowly asked, "You answer. What do you mean by wiping out the mountains?" Crushed by my aura, the man could barely breathe. He couldn't muster even a shred of defiance. After a moment, he gasped out, "The elders sent scouts to test the mountains, using the spiritual energy we bring back. They evaluate if this is an awakened ancient mountain range, and if it is, then they'll wipe it out completely. The cost of using modern weapons of mass destruction is astronomical, so they had to be absolutely sure first. But now, the testing is over. Soon, a heavily armed military force is going to flatten the Taihang Mountains. They're going to slaughter every single awakened creature here." As his words fell, the white tiger instinctively tensed its muscles. These awakened creatures might be incredibly powerful, but their current stage of evolution still isn't enough to survive a direct hit from modern civilization's destructive firepower. Humanity has ruled this world for so long, and their technological might still reign supreme over all spirits. Even with this new era dawning upon us, they refuse to let go of their power peacefully. They plan to use brute force to resist this evolution. Their logic is dead simple. Just wipe out existences like me, and all the spiritual energy in these mountains will naturally fall right into their laps. It's a crude, brutal plan, but ironically, it's working. The great mountains and mighty rivers are all coming back to life. It won't be long now. This world is going to completely awaken. The old era is coming to an end, and a new one is dawning. Right at that moment, the man started twitching uncontrollably. His mind had been completely broken. Now, he couldn't even form a single coherent sentence. After that, I slowly slithered back up the ancient tree. A long, drawn-out sigh echoed from high above. You could faintly hear the metallic grind of scales scraping together. It's been so long, humanity still hasn't learned to respect nature. Meanwhile, at the temple on Mount Wutai, the monks had gathered in the main courtyard. They were preparing to evacuate the temple and head down the mountain. But after softly chanting a prayer, the abbot refused to leave. He gazed out at the distant mountains and watched the rain slowly come to a stop. A deep sadness slowly washed over his face. Because the abbot knew, this wasn't a surrender. This current peace was nothing but the dead silence before the storm. By tomorrow, this place would turn into a literal sea of blood and flesh. He stopped his chanting, and reopened the communication lines between the outside world and the Taihang Mountains. This was basically a silent green light, allowing every living creature in the area, before total destruction actually hit. To make their final choice, the abbot sighed softly. Why does it have to come to this? He murmured, that being is just too proud. It refuses to bow its head. So, crushed beneath the wheels of modern civilization. That's the only fate left for it. At that thought, an unexplainable wave of grief hit the abbot. He had lived through that massive storm a century ago. He had once crossed paths with that giant crimson serpent. So, he wanted to stay and give it a proper farewell here in the Taihang Mountains. Right at dawn, deafening sirens started blaring across the entire Taihang region. Fleets of helicopters ripped through the sky, the roar of their rotors completely shattering the peace of the deep mountains. High-speed cameras mounted under the choppers beamed live feeds straight to the distant capital. The footage played out in a highly classified briefing room. Anyone with clearance to sit in there was pretty much a senior well over 100 years old. Suddenly, a raspy voice broke the silence. Are we dropping the heavy payloads? Flush those creatures out first. Deep in the Taihang Mountains, the moment the order was given, fireballs erupted across the peaks. A massive barrage of incendiary bombs rained down on the target zones. The deafening explosions felt like they were ripping the entire mountain apart. Flocks of terrified birds exploded from the treeline, waking up things that had been sleeping much, much deeper. Not too far away, a massive, pale creature stood tall on a mountain peak. Its huge body was covered in razor-sharp ice crystals. Freezing winds howled from its direction, turning the entire area into a bitter winter wasteland in the blink of an eye. Up in the ancient camphor tree deep within Taihang, my eyes snapped open. Liquid magma seemed to flow within them, like mirrors reflecting pure hellfire. I reared my massive head back, and let out a deafening, silent roar. An overwhelming, ancient presence exploded outward from my body. Instantly, the sky darkened. Pitch-black clouds came rolling in from every direction, churning together violently. Then, a massive bolt of lightning struck the earth. What followed was an absolute downpour. The faint morning light that had just peeked through was swallowed whole by an eerie gray haze. As the torrential rain blurred the line between heaven and earth, an invisible, crushing pressure clamped down on the chest of every single person who had dared to enter the mountains. A storm of icy blades rained down from the sky. The helicopter fleet had nowhere to run. Tongues of fire spat from the machine guns, clashing with the freezing rain. Then, the screen went pitch black. Inside a dimly lit conference room, an ancient, gravelly voice broke the silence. It seems the Taihang Mountains won't fall easily. We know that much now. Just have the ground satellites lock onto their coordinates, and keep raining hellfire on them. These modern awakened beasts won't last much longer. They simply haven't had enough time to grow. Immediately, another voice chimed in. Our family's Shihei system is fully prepped and ready. You old bats have been hiding your trump cards for way too long. Isn't it about time you showed us what you're really working with? As the words echoed, the room fell into a heavy silence. But soon, one by one, the others spoke up. To wipe out that terrifying entity, these stubborn old fools were actually bringing out their ultimate, closely guarded treasures. Putting everything on the line. Meanwhile, deep within the Taihang Mountains, I was using my bare flesh to clash against the human ground forces. They were the elite squad assigned to guard the satellite arrays, armed to the teeth with heavy artillery and 3 attack choppers, and hidden within that massive rig in the back. was a fully primed guided missile, but under my relentless onslaught, the ground troops scrambled into their choppers, fleeing the battlefield in absolute panic. The second they were clear, that hidden missile was detonated. In a split second, my massive body was entirely swallowed by a roaring fireball. But the torrential rain quickly snuffed out the blazing inferno. Suddenly, an ancient sword shot out from the smoking rubble. It struck the satellite console with dead-on precision. I glared coldly into the distance, watching the choppers retreat. The golden, fiery glow in my eyes flickered through the heavy downpour. Just then, thin lines of crimson blood began to seep from beneath my scales. Despite everything, I had taken damage. Not only were my scales blasted apart, but a few of my ribs were shattered as well. That missile was practically a direct hit. If I hadn't summoned my ancient swords as a shield at the very last second, these wounds would have been vastly more fatal. Pushing through the pain, I took a deep breath, desperately drawing in the faint traces of spiritual energy from the air. This energy was crucial for healing my broken body. There wasn't much of it left, making every single drop incredibly precious. Suddenly, a chilling sensation crept over me. Eyes were watching me from high up in the heavens. My lingering memories of being a human made me realize exactly what it was. Those were the artificial satellites floating out in cold space. Those chunks of metal orbiting the planet were not just eyes. They were weapons. That meant I had to completely wipe out every trace of my presence here. I really wasn't sure if this torrential storm was enough to mask our movements. All along the way, brutal, bloody battles were erupting across the mountain ranges. I saw a massive, fiery bird dive bombing the human squads, instantly crushing a fighter jet with a single flap of its burning wings. But tragically, its fiery aura was shredded by a relentless hail of bullets, and a deadly bolt eventually tore right through its throat. There was also a giant white egret cloaked in thick ice armor, freezing a path of destruction straight through the enemy's armored tanks. Yet, it was mercilessly pinned down by 9 mystical bronze rings, and ultimately decapitated by the human forces. I slowly closed my eyes. The blazing golden fire in my gaze instantly faded into darkness. A split second later, they snapped wide open. The light burning inside them was far more blinding than before, and far more radiant. In that moment, the raw spiritual power surged through my veins like boiling blood. It roared through my entire body like a frenzied dragon. My shattered scales began healing at incredible speed. My shattered bones snapped violently back into place, as the murderous aura of my ancient swords erupted, blacking out the sky. Is that all you've got? You really think you can conquer the Taihang Mountains with just this? It's nowhere near enough. As my roar echoed, my massive, serpentine body vanished in a blur. Slithering dangerously low to the ground, I lunged forward. Whipping up a fierce gale, dozens of blood-red flying swords trailed closely behind me. Someone holding a bow aimed at me through the artillery fire. After firing a single arrow, he thought he had nailed his target, but when he looked up again, he was met with a pair of piercing golden eyes. A split second later, an ancient sword flashed right in front of him, slicing him into countless pieces. After the lightning crashed to the ground, I took a quick glance and casually swept the remnants away. On the other side of the battlefield, a woman with flawless makeup raised her hand. With just a wave of her hand, she triggered a mysterious shift in the air, completely neutralizing the brute force of the fierce tiger wrapped in lightning. The white tiger roared in fury. If it could just get close to that woman, it knew it could smash her to a pulp with a single swipe. By now, I had quietly slipped into this part of the battlefield, and noticed the small flags secretly planted all around us. Just then, the woman spoke up, sneering at the white tiger. "So, you're the one who killed my unlucky little brother. He might have been totally worthless, but he was still my own flesh and blood. But you can die right here and be buried with him." As soon as she finished, her hands blurred into a series of rapid signs. It was the spirit channeling method used to activate an ancient artifact. Then, an ancient, primordial language spilled from her lips. Inside the zone trapped by the array flags, a massive wave of spiritual energy crashed down, pooling into a towering inferno. The flames stretched endlessly, looking like they were going to roast the white tiger alive. The white tiger roared again and again, its blazing aura slowly fading away. It was getting ready to fight to the death, but right at that moment, the woman suddenly furrowed her delicate brows. She realized that one corner of her array flags was missing, and they kept disappearing. In the span of just a few breaths, all 6 array flags were yanked out one by one. She had already activated the ancient artifact, and the brutal backlash from it being forcibly stopped instantly wounded her. A trickle of blood slowly seeped from the corner of her mouth. The array flags were supposed to be guarded, and forcibly yanking out activated flags is even harder than violently breaking the array itself. So something powerful must have just shown up. At that thought, her heart skipped a beat. She immediately remembered the grave warnings of her clan elders. Deep in the mountains hides an extraordinary beast. Killing people at our level would be absolute child's play. Thinking about that, she didn't dare continue her spell, and instantly faded back into the crowd. Immediately, the flames vanished. That sweltering, roasting heat from just a moment ago instantly morphed into the cool, refreshing feeling of a heavy downpour. Looking at the rain-soaked mountains revealing themselves once again, the white tiger felt, for the very first time, that getting completely drenched in the rain was actually incredibly soothing. That was when I showed up right in front of it, carrying the 6 ancient array flags. That woman was sharp. She had already retreated and hidden herself among the crowd. I wasn't in the best shape right now, and I couldn't be bothered to chase after her. It was only then that the white tiger noticed the fine spray of bloodstains across my body. Since my body is naturally a deep crimson red, the blood streaks weren't very obvious. But right at that moment, I suddenly noticed the distant crowd pulling back like a receding tide. Across the entire mountain, there was absolute silence, save for the sound of the pouring rain. Seeing this, my instincts kicked in. I whipped my tail and sent the white tiger flying out of harm's way. A split second later, a beam of light shaped like a sword plummeted from the sky. The white tiger didn't even have time to react, before it watched a blinding sun rise right in the middle of the mountains. The extreme light and searing heat, sweeping across the entire world in a flash, the mountain peaks were completely melted away. The forests were flattened to the ground, and my massive crimson body was completely swallowed up in that blinding, blazing light. The white tiger let out a roar of absolute despair. A second later, that overwhelming light brutally burned its eyes blind, with blood streaming down its sockets. Every single second, the Taihang Mountains were suffering massive devastation. Beyond the unimaginable financial losses in the mortal world, there were also shattered ancient relics, and the tragic loss of generation after generation of exceptional youth. Yet, the elders in the boardroom remained perfectly calm. Even that old man named Song Sheng was playing a smooth, old jazz tune from the Shanghai Bund of the last century right in the meeting room. Immersed in the singer's classic, lingering voice, the elders seemed transported back to their glory days of youth. Song Sheng stood up, spread his arms wide, and laughed wildly. The sun goddess has brought us a new dawn. The Taihang Mountains right now are like a beautiful woman stripped bare, just waiting for us to feast upon. For the next 500 years, this era belongs to us. And for the next 5 million years, it will still belong to us. Meanwhile, in a temple on Mount Wutai, Tongwei gazed at the sun slowly rising in the south. He softly chanted a Buddhist prayer in silence. He could clearly feel that her spirit was fading away beneath that scorching sun. After what felt like an eternity, the rain finally stopped. Sunlight bathed the scarred, devastated earth of the Taihang Mountains. Only then did people realize that dusk had already quietly fallen. A young man stared off into the distance, then slowly shook his head. Those old fools really went all out. Shihei is the legendary sun goddess, who rides a golden chariot drawn by 6 crimson dragons, commanding time itself, day and night. Legend says she unhurriedly drives her dragon chariot, rising and setting right alongside the sun. The young man stepped onto this land of absolute despair. A massive bronze cauldron hovered right above his head, casting down a pale golden barrier of light that kept him perfectly safe inside. Shielded by the cauldron, he walked step by step to the very center of where Shihei had struck. There, he saw the white tiger, with only half of its body left intact. Then, his eyes dropped into the massive crater, onto the colossal crimson body that was still faintly twitching. What terrifying vitality! The young man couldn't help but mutter in absolute awe. But as he actually got closer to my towering form, he didn't smell scorched flesh or blood. Instead, it was a strange, delicate fragrance. The scent drifted into his nose, making him frown without even realizing it. He was clearly walking into the heart of a living hell. Yet everything around him felt like a blooming peach orchard in the spring. I just kept twisting in the crater. My scales were completely blown apart, and my entire spine was snapped in half. But my golden eyes were still burning bright. It meant I wasn't truly dead just yet. Right then, the young man raised his right hand. He chanted an ancient, rhythmic spell, and golden light poured down from above, making him look like an absolute god king. I could feel an overwhelming, suffocating killing intent. At this point, every single nerve in my body was already completely destroyed. The young man thought I was struggling to fight back, but it was actually just my muscles twitching on pure instinct, roasting against the scorching magma on the ground. Honestly, I didn't want to move at all. I had already given it everything I had. If I can't protect it, then so be it. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't supposed to end like this. The awakening of the mountains meant that everything should have been perfectly in place. What we call sudden is only true for those with fleeting lives. The shifting of the mountains should be measured in tens of thousands of years. I've truly felt the breath of the Taihang Mountains. It's an overwhelming, ancient, and absolute mystery, as if echoing from billions of years past. A change like this doesn't just happen without warning. The power built over 8,000 years of civilization is truly shattered by the spiritual awakening. Then there must be another force, meant specifically to bury everything from the old era. Right then, the ancient runes on the massive cauldron suddenly sprang to life. The glowing symbols transformed into wild beasts and birds of prey, endlessly circling the bronze vessel. And that single spark of divine fire from the ancient times was drawn out by the young man. Ripples tore through the air. He was being impossibly cautious. He wouldn't even step a half-inch closer to me, planning to strike me down with the divine flame from afar. To end it all, once and for all, that divine spark grew larger and larger in my eyes. But suddenly, between the young man and me, a hazy figure appeared out of nowhere. The figure felt like an illusion, a mysterious veil hiding their face. Twilight mountains reflected in that veil. They simply raised a hand, so casually, and the roaring flame fell right into their palm, instantly shrinking into something the size of a tiny seed. The young man's face went pale. He tried to force the cauldron to move, but the massive vessel wouldn't budge an inch. Even the roaring flames seemed to freeze in that exact moment. It was as if the whole world had just stopped breathing. He tried to pull back, only to realize he couldn't move a single muscle either. I barely managed to open my one good eye. I couldn't make out the face of that hazy figure, but somehow, I knew they were smiling. A smile so incredibly tender and warm. Meanwhile, in a clearing not far away, the humans had already started sorting the artifacts pulled from the Taihang Mountains. They were categorizing them one by one. An old man with one foot in the grave was helped to the scene by his medics. He cast a quick glance at a stalk of phoenix song grass blazing with purple fire, and rasped, "This relic. I assume the Li family has no objections to us taking it?" Another clan elder standing behind him chuckled, "Brother Li, just take it, no need to be so polite with us. By the way, is that kid from the Song family still not back?" "Oh, that's completely normal. You all know exactly how cunning that little brat is. If you ask me, out of all the kids in this generation, when it comes to temperament, he's the one who will probably go the furthest. It pays to be cautious." Elder Li let out a heavy sigh. If only his own boy had been half as alert, he wouldn't have been torn apart by those beasts. The boy had real talent. Such a shame he was so arrogant. While the old man was lost in his thoughts, a terrifying wave of heat suddenly crashed over them. The blistering air scorched his skin. Squinting through the blinding glare, the old man strained to look at the relic in the center of the heat. The dark purple flames on its leaves were silently, impossibly, igniting all over again. And the fire was spreading violently in every direction. But it wasn't just there. Every single relic they had found was suddenly going through a horrifying mutation. A voice echoed, softly chanting an ancient tongue, so gentle, like reading a poem. It sounded like it was coming from the edge of the heavens, yet whispering right in their ears. At that exact moment, the young man's eyes reflected a sea of starlight, rising and gathering from the mountains below. That ethereal figure opened their delicate arms, as if trying to pull me into a warm embrace. And right then, that tiny seed forged from the divine fire. It continued to melt in their palm, eventually turning into a single drop of clear liquid. Then, the figure leaned over slightly, taking the clear liquid from their hands and letting it fall onto my head. It felt just like the ancient legends, where a god crowns a mortal king. Then they reached out, gently touching the bone mask that covered my serpent face, before vanishing into thin air. At that moment, the very last ray of twilight finally sank deep into the mountains. The light faded away completely, but another, far more intense fire, was suddenly ignited in the dark. The young man backed away, step by step. He realized I was transforming. My injuries didn't matter to me anymore, because in just a single breath, I grew brand new scales. Every bone in my body was popping and cracking. At the same time, my head began to change as well. The scales near my neck grew wildly, stretching and branching out, like fresh buds suddenly sprouting after a long, harsh winter. Until finally, massive, branching horns with the texture of mahogany grew out, and the process finally stopped. Golden flames blazed fiercely in my eyes. At this moment, the red serpent evolved into a mighty Jiao dragon. The young man stared at my evolution, burning every single detail deep into his memory. To witness such an ancient, majestic transformation with his own eyes, he felt that even if he died right now, he wouldn't have any regrets. But right at that moment, I reared my massive head back, and my gigantic body shot straight up into the sky. My colossal, crimson body vanished into the clouds. The young man suddenly snapped out of his daze. He knew his plan was completely ruined. Even though I hadn't grown dragon claws, he felt it was far more accurate to call me a clawless Jiao dragon, rather than just a snake with horns. Just then, the clouds parted, revealing a breathtaking, vast galaxy of stars behind them. A massive, terrifying head lowered from the clouds, staring down at him in total silence. He could even see his own terrified reflection, inside my glowing golden eyes. Crimson scales drifted down from the sky, just like a flurry of autumn maple leaves. He instinctively reached out to catch one, but when he looked down, his palm was completely empty. When he looked up again, he suddenly felt a hand pressing down on the top of his head. The touch felt incredibly light, yet it forced him down so hard he couldn't even stand up. He was forced to his knees, bowing in submission before this ancient, unfathomable being. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of a slender human silhouette. Then, a cold, piercing voice echoed out, "Before dawn breaks, if anyone is foolish enough to remain in the Taihang Mountains, they will be buried here forever." After that, I walked over to the white tiger, looking at its horribly mangled body, with only half of it remaining. A random thought crossed my mind. Wow, this little kitty was actually pretty massive. It was a shame that half of its face had been completely torn off. I then sliced open my own wrist, and let my blood spill over its wounds. A massive surge of spiritual energy radiated from my blood, rising into the air like a thick, white mist. Then, I sat right down on the ground, inspecting my own human body, a form I hadn't seen in hundreds of years. While waiting for the white tiger to wake up, it wasn't truly dead yet, merely trapped in a deep sleep. Now, infused with the immense power of my blood, its consciousness was slowly returning, bit by bit. A moment later, a single, glowing green eye snapped open, glaring fiercely at the unfamiliar figure standing right in front of it. Instantly, fierce bolts of blue lightning erupted from its body. As far as the tiger knew, with the red dragon dead, the Taihang Mountains had fallen right back into human hands. So, naturally, it saw everything before its eyes as an enemy, until it noticed the young boy's forehead. Those twin horns branching out like tree limbs. Only then did the fierce rage in its eyes suddenly turn into shock. Then, it called out to me hesitantly, and I gave a gentle nod. I spoke softly, "There is no need to worry anymore. It will all be over soon." Then, a fierce wind lifted me high into the sky. I sat suspended, right at the same height as the mountain peaks. In the end, the humans failed to take anything away from the great mountain. Even after paying such a heavy price, they had no choice but to leave in silence. And even though their hearts were burning with bitter resentment, all they had to do was look up. Once they saw that figure sitting among the mountain ranges, that terrifying silhouette, half human and half dragon, they had to swallow their pride and hold back their fury. As the very first rays of dawn broke through, I slowly closed my eyes. Oh, I will definitely make the masterminds pay for what they did. But right now, I have far more important things to do. These mountains pulled me back from the very edge of death, granting me the chance to evolve and be reborn. That single drop of clear liquid, it was the ultimate essence of every living spirit in the entire Taihang Mountains. In other words, the very catalyst for my transformation was the mountain range itself. And now that my rebirth is complete, it is time for me to take this spiritual energy and return it back to the mountains. So, I brought out the young man's bronze cauldron. I sealed the majestic spiritual veins inside it, and as the ancient words were chanted once more, the ancient symbols carved into the bronze cauldron seemed to completely come alive. Right after that, an unimaginably massive wave of spiritual energy cascaded down from the heavens. Those living ancient symbols carried the spiritual energy with them, wandering into every single corner of the Taihang Mountains. This process would go on for a very, very long time. And after a long while, when all the living symbols had finally crossed the entire mountain range, I raised my eyes. I gazed out at the lush, vast earth in the distance. And in the very next moment, a torrential downpour washed over the Taihang Mountains once again. Soon, a cluster of green leaves pushed their way through the scorched earth. The entire mountain range was bursting with new life once more. Even though it was the peak of summer, it somehow felt like the first awakening of spring. At that exact moment, right in front of the temple gates at Mount Wutai, a tiny deer made of ancient symbols stepped forward. This was the very last stop on its journey. A look of confusion flickered in its pitch-black eyes, because there was no beautiful scenery here. There were no grand sights, only an old monk who had already passed away. After the rain finally stopped, the mountains took on a refreshing, poetic charm. It was a pity it could not compare to the little bird resting on my head. I leaned against a tree trunk, flipping through some ancient scriptures. Small birds were happily chirping between the branching jade horns on my forehead. Whenever I looked up, I could see the towering phantoms of the mountains resting high above the clouds, stretching on for 10,000 miles and piercing straight into the heavens. Even though those mountain illusions had not fully materialized yet, that ancient, primordial aura had already blanketed the land. Over the past few days, I had watched them slowly manifest with my own eyes. They were getting clearer and clearer, and it would not be long before they truly appeared in this world, the divine mountains of Taihang, revealing their true face that had been hidden in the shadows of time. Majestic, solemn, and entirely beyond description. Just then, a flash of pure light darted past. A giant, pale claw stepped under the old camphor tree, as the fierce white tiger emerged from the forest. It carried a document in its jaws. These were tributes from certain families with ancient lineages, things they specifically offered to me. They were hoping that by doing this, they could avoid being wiped out when I finally make my return to the world. Every so often, the white tiger would go collect these tributes for me, and bring them back under the old camphor tree on the island in the center of the lake. And that is exactly where these ancient scriptures in my hands came from. At first, those people were absolutely terrified, but when they saw that I did not refuse, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. After that, they became even more eager to offer their tributes. Even some noble families who had never once set foot in the Taihang Mountains, upon hearing the news, rushed to send over rare ancient texts, just hoping to get a little something in return. The white tiger asked me, "Are we really just going to let it go?" These days, her fur is completely white, with pitch-black stripes. When she runs, she still looks as majestic as ever. But that scar over her left eye is still there. She could have easily healed it when she went through her transformation, but she chose not to. She told me that scars are just another part of a king's crown. Not to mention, she will never, ever forget that day. I never said that I was just going to let this go. I slowly turned a page of the scripture and said without even looking up, "That is just what they foolishly assume." The white tiger replied, "But you already accepted their tributes. Fierce beasts are quite simple-minded." The way she sees it, if you take something from someone, it means you have agreed to the deal. Just like how ancient vassal states paid tribute to the empire, and in return, the empire sent troops to protect them in times of crisis. Isn't that exactly how it works? I just rolled my eyes, jumped down from the tree, and closed the scripture. I pointed my finger right at her and said, "You silly cat, you are great and all. But you are way too straightforward." Ever since I took on human form, appearing as a young boy, and roaming these mountains, I have always called her that. The white tiger doesn't seem to mind it, though. After all, this king of beasts knows very well that with all the centuries I have lived in these mountains, calling her a youngster is perfectly fair. Even though the white tiger didn't completely understand what I meant, she could still sense something had changed. Back when I was a giant red snake, every time I showed up, I carried this overwhelming, king-like presence that practically suffocated everyone around me. But now, I am much calmer. I no longer have that terrifying aura of absolute oppression. I lost that strict, ruler-like vibe. and feel more like a family member or even a friend. Deep down, the white tiger truly feels that ever since I became this young boy, it is like I have finally let go of something. I casually tossed the precious texts from those noble families to the side and said calmly, I will not lay a finger on them myself. But there are still some wandering ghosts trapped in this world. I will personally send them off to reincarnation. By the time the sun started setting in the west, the white tiger didn't stick around any longer. She pushed off with her legs and dashed away like a flash of lightning. On her way, she kept thinking about what I had said. She thought to herself, maybe she should go find a few mountain villagers and ask them what the heck I actually meant. Those ancient books treasured by the noble families helped me see this world in a whole new light, even though it is pretty similar to the world I remember from when I was human. There are still a lot of subtle, bizarre differences. The famous emperors from the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties just do not match up. King Wu's conquest of Zhou has turned into a completely different legend, where the fall of a dynasty is mixed with the creation of gods. It is only mentioned briefly in the hidden histories of the texts. And the tales of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors are hardly even talked about. Because of this, the people of this era call themselves the descendants of the Great Yan. This title comes from the Great Yan Empire, which united all the nations after the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties. And most of the ancient artifacts wielded by awakened humans actually come from those 3 ancient dynasties, the Xia, Shang, and Zhou. In those days, people used ancient bronze artifacts to seal the true spirits of heaven and earth, allowing divine powers to live on. Even now, thousands of years later, the spirits sealed within still haven't completely faded away. They've been reactivated by these awakeners, turning into the ultimate trump cards for the great families. Thinking about this, I casually picked up a piece of fruit and fed it to the bird resting on my horn. Feeling more like a part of the wild nature, birds have been landing on my horns quite often lately. While they checked me out, I brought out the bronze cauldron. Saw that almost all the living pictograms carved on it had returned to their places, except for a tiny missing piece in one corner. That little seal script deer still hadn't come back. The wisp of spirit it carried still hadn't found its resting place. Thinking about this, I made up my mind and decided to go take a look for myself. The next second, I leapt up, and in a flash, I vanished into the clouds. By the time I arrived in front of that temple, I happened to see an old man holding a broom, sweeping up the fallen leaves. So, I walked up and asked him if they were still selling incense here. The old monk looked up at me and said, "Yes, we are. But there's no need for money. This wind is blowing rather strangely." Then, he waved at me and said, "Young man, come help these old bones sweep up the leaves." I didn't mind, so I agreed. After I finished sweeping up the fallen leaves, the old man kept his word and handed me 3 sticks of incense. Just as I was about to leave, the monk pressed his hands together, bowed deeply, and said, "Amitabha. O great god of Taihang Mountain, this humble monk pays his respects. Asking you to sweep the floor just now was merely a joke. I hope your grace won't take offense." I turned my head around and said calmly, "All right, save it. Old man, you're not exactly the formal type anyway. Forcing yourself to speak with such flowery words, doesn't it feel awkward to you? You were pretty quick and casual when you handed me that broom earlier. I didn't see you acting all terrified and respectful then." After saying that, I took the 3 sticks of incense, stepped over the threshold, and walked into the temple. The old man's loud laughter echoed behind me. Then I heard him call out from behind, "I never expected you to be so clear-minded." Without even looking back, I replied, "You know what? Even if you desperately try to live a few extra years, sooner or later, you'll reach the day where you see through it all." Following that, the old monk sat back down in his bamboo chair under the old pine tree. He probably never imagined that the terrifying existence in Taihang Mountain, the one who made all the old masters tremble in fear, would actually look like a teenage boy, and be quite polite at that. And pretty interesting, too. He originally thought the one showing up would be an intimidating old man with horns on his head, exuding natural authority. After I entered the temple, a highly senior-looking monk led the way for me. He told me that the little seal script deer was now resting in the temple's backyard, guarding the room where the abbot lived before he passed away. Everyone was completely helpless about it, so they could only wait for its true master to arrive. It's a pity the abbot has already passed away, and our cultivation is far too shallow. We are completely unqualified to discuss the Tao with a being like you. I asked when the abbot had passed away. The monk replied that it was 7 months ago, right when dusk gave way to the night. He said his uncle master, the abbot, was the one with the deepest cultivation among them. Logically speaking, with his level of cultivation, even if he lived past 100, he should have only looked slightly old. But strangely enough, he didn't even make it to his 100th birthday before passing away prematurely. When we got to the backyard, the little runic deer was resting right in front of one of the doors, just as I expected. When it saw me coming, its bright black eyes instantly lit up with a faint glow. Seeing this, I casually summoned my bronze cauldron. The little deer didn't resist at all. In an instant, it turned into a streak of light and shot back into the cauldron, transforming back into the running, deer-shaped rune carved into the bronze. Staring at this ancient bronze artifact, the monk beside me couldn't hide the shock in his eyes. But he quickly snapped out of it. He softly chanted a Buddhist prayer, pushing down the swirling, chaotic thoughts in his mind. Then, he pushed open the wooden door. A faint, refreshing fragrance lingered in the room. Inside, there was only a table, a chair, a cabinet, and a bed. Nothing else. The monk froze in his tracks. The abbot was nowhere to be found in the entire room. Logically speaking, if a person had been dead for a week, especially in the blazing heat of midsummer, even if the body didn't rot or smell, it absolutely shouldn't have just vanished without a trace. But right now, let alone a body, there wasn't a single mark left behind. Filled with total confusion, the monk couldn't help but ask, "Benefactor, is this what happens to all awakened beings?" "No," I replied calmly. With that, I walked over to the bed and looked down, picking up a lustrous, bead-like gem. It was pitch black. When the monk saw it, he could no longer hide his sheer shock. He whispered, "Could this be a relic bead?" I didn't say much. I simply placed the relic bead into his hand. Lying right next to where the bead had been was a book. I picked it up and flipped through it. The writings inside weren't Buddhist scriptures. Instead, it was a collection of bizarre tales about ghosts and monsters. But in one particular story, there was a line of small text written by the abbot himself. It read, "There is a temple on the southern mountain, called the Red Immortal. Its wood is like golden fire, its body like crimson silk. It breathes through the wind and rain, shining down upon the people. Its true name is the Red Dragon." I closed the book and slowly walked out into the courtyard. I looked up at the twisted branches of the old ginkgo tree, and casually caught a falling yellow leaf. I spoke up, "Hey there, little lady. How much longer are you going to keep swinging up there?" The moment I said that, the monk jumped in surprise. He instinctively looked up too, but all he could see were ginkgo leaves falling like snow. He couldn't see anything else at all. At that exact moment, the girl hiding up in the canopy, shaking the branches, froze completely. The playful excitement on her face vanished in a flash. Looking down in pure disbelief, she realized that my clear, calm eyes were staring right at her, dead on. Seeing that my gaze hadn't wavered one bit, she finally stuck her tongue out playfully and reached out to peel back an invisible barrier. She revealed her true form. Watching this unfold, even the usually calm and disciplined monks were left completely dumbfounded. They never could have imagined that inside this old ginkgo tree they walked past every single day hid a real, awakened being. Swinging her legs from the branch, the girl puffed her cheeks and demanded to know how on earth I had spotted her. The monk beside me couldn't hold back anymore. Who exactly is this young lady?" I just shook my head. "That's not a young lady," I told him. "That's the ginkgo tree itself. Fierce beings slaughter each other to fight over a medium, so they can step onto the path of awakening. It's actually not that rare among the beasts and birds of the wild. But plants and trees are different. They can't just up and move their bodies around. They have no way to actively fight for opportunities. That's why, in these vast mountains today, awakened birds and beasts aren't exactly rare, but plant spirits are pitifully scarce. For them to walk this path of cultivation, it's just so much harder than it is for animals." I couldn't help but look at her like she was some kind of rare, exotic creature. But that gaze of mine completely ticked the girl off. She might be a ginkgo tree, but she totally gave off the vibe of a ruffled little kitten. She immediately puffed up and snapped, "Ignoring me is one thing, but what's with that look? Are you pitying me, or do you just think I can't fight? You want to come up here and go a few rounds?" I just smiled, not even bothering to entertain her little provocation. Instead, I casually asked, "Do you have a name?" The girl instinctively tilted her chin up. I never change my name. Or hide my surname. It's Chu Sha. After she said that, she finally realized I was changing the subject. She immediately rolled up her sleeves again and shouted, "Hey, hey, hey. Answer me, are you gonna come up here and fight me or what?" I completely ignored her and turned to ask the monks standing nearby. When your abbot was still in the secular world, was his name also Chu Sha? The monks quickly shook their heads. We apologize, but we really don't know. When we took our vows, the abbot was already a highly respected and venerable monk. There's no way we'd know his secular name. Being ignored over and over, the girl finally lost her temper and jumped straight down from the tree. She marched right up to me, absolutely fuming, and glared daggers at me. Meanwhile, the smile on my face remained as gentle as ever. Seeing this, the monks hurriedly took a few steps back, giving this little terror some space. They were probably praying that if his two awakened beings really had to fight, we wouldn't do it inside the temple. If we accidentally wrecked the place, they'd all be stuck meditating outside tonight. But the strange thing was, as soon as the girl met my icy gaze, she suddenly quieted down. She looked like a ruffled cat that had just been petted smooth. Seeing this, I finally asked her, "Were you raised by an old monk?" Chu Sha nodded. She kept sneaking glances at my face, probably calculating in her head that if I suddenly snapped my jaws open to eat her, she'd immediately turn tail and run for her life. But instead, I just held out my hand. I said calmly, "The item that the monk asked you to give me before he passed away. How long are you planning to hide it? It's about time you handed it over." All the fiery arrogance immediately drained from the girl's face. She muttered under her breath, "Did the old man tell you about this too?" "Wait, no. How did you know?" I didn't answer. I just quietly stared at her. Being stared down like that, she obviously started feeling more and more guilty. Finally, she obediently scrambled back up the tree on all fours. A moment later, she slid back down, clutching a small booklet. She shoved the booklet into my hand and mumbled unhappily, "It's a cultivation manual. The old man insisted I keep it. He said that when the temple welcomed its first pilgrim, I was supposed to hand it over." I flipped open the booklet, and after a quick glance, I immediately recognized it as a genuine, ancient cultivation manual. The tiny seal script characters written inside were from the exact same lineage as the pictographs on the bronze cauldron. It was completely different from those ancient texts offered up by the noble families. Those ones, most of them just record fragments or various guesses about the hidden era. But this booklet is something that can actually set someone on the path of cultivation. After a quick glance, I asked her, "Why don't you use it to cultivate?" The girl just shrugged. "I would have learned it a long time ago if I could. But I can't, so there's nothing I can do. This booklet is only half a copy, and it's the second half. I can't even figure out how to get started with it." Hearing this, I nodded. I told her it was a great gift. Then, with just a thought, the bronze cauldron appeared. I took out all the texts offered by those noble families, bringing out every single scripture related to Buddhism. A monk nearby casually picked one up, and after flipping through it, his face was filled with absolute shock. These were all secret Buddhist scrolls and hidden lore hoarded by the noble families. And now, I was leaving every single one of them right here. At the same time, the little deer carved on the bronze cauldron leapt out once again. Wrapped in a faint glow of Buddhist light, the little deer raised its head proudly. The spiritual energy from its breath turned into a single drop of dew, falling right into Chu Sha's palm. I looked at her and said, "If you can manage to grasp some enlightenment from this, I'll take you out of the temple and give you the power to walk the world." That completely careless look on Chu Sha's face finally faded a little. With a hint of surprise in her voice, she asked, "Really?" I replied calmly, "Compared to what you've given me today, this small return gift is nothing. Of course, that's assuming you can actually figure something out from it. Because at the end of the day, this booklet belongs to the monk, and you're just benefiting from his kindness." The girl carefully tucked away that wisp of spiritual energy, looking at me with a complicated expression. I just waved my hand and said, "All right, study hard. I'll take you out to see the world later." With that, I raised my hand, guiding the little deer back into the earth. After wandering through all the Buddhist halls in the temple, by the time I eventually found my way back under the ginkgo tree, I suddenly stopped in my tracks. At this very moment, I could clearly feel my energy surging to its absolute peak. But simply because I was inside the Taihang Mountains, my aura blended perfectly with the mountains, so the tribulation clouds never actually struck down. Ever since that day when I was granted the medium and began this ancient evolution, I've been in this incredibly mysterious state. I already had one foot in the new realm, but strictly speaking, I hadn't fully crossed over into it yet. My level of existence didn't seem fundamentally different from the white tiger or the ginkgo tree. But now, after walking through this mortal temple, this opportunity had been pushed to its absolute limit. It was time for my tribulation, but I absolutely couldn't face it here in Taihang. If I stayed in the Taihang Mountains and drew in the tribulation clouds now, the mountains would naturally try to shield me, and if that happened, I wouldn't be able to absorb the divine essence from the lightning, which meant I couldn't achieve true rebirth through the trial. In this era of revival, I was an apex predator. And I still am, if I just curled up and hid in Taihang because I was scared of the lightning. I would despise myself for playing it so safe that I lost my edge and my courage. At best, I'd just be a wise survivor. I'd never actually transform into a true dragon. Right at that moment, a rare, massive rainstorm poured down from the sky like a solid wall of water. A group of young people were excitedly chasing after a terrifying thunderstorm that had suddenly formed between heaven and earth. To them, this kind of sudden, freak weather was just another chance to find a path to immortality. So, one car after another sped recklessly down the country highway. They just wanted to chase after that lightning-laced sky. Some were even secretly thinking that maybe, if they could just catch a single drop of rain from that storm, their whole lives would change forever. The young guy driving glanced at the passenger seat, only to realize the familiar, handsome guy wasn't there. He couldn't help but ask, speaking of which, what's the deal with Brother Song? Haven't seen him for days. That young man who usually sat in the passenger seat was incredibly articulate. And so knowledgeable, hanging out in their circle day to day. He had long become one of their core members. But he suddenly vanished a while ago. Nobody had a clue where he went. The woman in the backseat leaned forward, resting her chin on the back of the seat, and laughed. Brother Song is in the hospital. I heard he accidentally fell down the stairs. Got a minor fracture. The driver pictured Song Zijo's usual suave, playboy vibe. And if he was really lying in a hospital bed in a cast? He instantly burst out laughing. But they hadn't driven much further before the road ahead was completely blocked off. A group of heavily armed, burly men guarded the intersection, blocking all the cars from going any further. In the distance, the thunderstorm raged on, as branching lightning tore through the sky, looking like it was ripping a massive crack right through the heavens. One of the burly men raised a hand, signaling them to stop. Rolling down the window, the young kids in the car exchanged nervous glances. They gulped hard, their minds racing with anxiety. Could they have run into terrorists or something? They had never seen a setup like this before. Seeing no reaction from inside the car, the burly man took 2 steps closer. He knocked on the window, flashed his ID, and said, "Severe storm ahead. It's too dangerous, no vehicles allowed." But right at that moment, another massive bolt of lightning violently pierced the clouds. That almost brutal flash of light crushed every color in the world, leaving behind only stark black and white. Everyone in the car instinctively held their breath, because they saw it, plain as day. Deep within that raging storm, there seemed to be a massive, twisting, dragon-like silhouette, flickering in and out of sight. At this very moment, I was sitting coiled right in the center of the lightning. My entire body was bathed in electrical light. As my scales opened and closed, it looked like lightning-infused blood was coursing through them. An aura of blood wrapped around me. Fine traces of blood kept seeping from between my scales, only to be instantly washed clean by the torrential rain. The space inside the tribulation clouds felt like an entirely different world, completely unlike ordinary, natural lightning. Every single bolt of lightning here existed not just to obliterate the one undergoing the trial. It felt almost alive, harboring an unimaginable blend of death and vitality. Soon, a terrifying transformation began taking over my body. My massive dragon form coiled beneath the thunderclouds. My head was slightly lowered. Right at that moment, a golden, human-shaped figure slowly appeared above my ferocious head. Radiating divine light, I stared at that gradually materializing golden hand right in front of me. I already knew what it was. That had to be the golden avatar of the primordial spirit, just like the ancient texts described. Legend has it that when certain cultivators refine their essence, energy, and spirit to the absolute limit, they can ultimately condense a 3-inch golden avatar in their sea of consciousness. From then on, their primordial spirit can leave the body. They can travel through the void. Anyone who reaches this realm is incredibly hard to truly kill. As long as their primordial spirit can escape, they are practically immortal and indestructible. For a lot of people, making it this far into the tribulation meant they had basically survived it. But I knew it. This wasn't my path. The golden avatar was perfect for the human cultivators of the last era, but it definitely didn't. That is not for me. I slowly let out a heavy breath. The tribulation clouds, which were just about to fade, suddenly became even more furious. I purposely let that forming golden human figure shatter on its own, turning into countless shards of golden light, melting right back into my true body. In an instant, ancient golden runes appeared across my dragon belly. High above in the sky, the tribulation clouds churned madly. The aura was countless times more terrifying than before. The killing intent was so thick it was almost tangible. My scales locked tight, and golden flames roared to life. From within the thunderclouds, it sounded as if someone was chanting in ancient scripture. Igniting every ounce of power in my body, I recalled a 5-element slaughtering technique I once found in an ancient text. Even though I have not been practicing it for long, and have not had the time to find a true physical vessel for the power of the 5 elements, I can just use my own body as the weapon. To fight against the heavenly tribulation, the lightning suddenly flared blindingly bright. My crimson dragon body looked incredibly tiny beneath the endless sea of tribulation clouds. But I did not feel a single ounce of fear. The way I see it, this is far from the first deadly trial I have faced in my life, and it certainly will not be the last. Then, I activated the slaughtering technique. Golden runes kept emerging all over me, linking together into an ancient scripture. The laws of the 5 elements wove and rotated within my body. Gold and fire formed a seal, slicing right through the thunder. Channeling boundless life force, the crimson dragon raised its head and let out a deafening roar. Only by walking my own path can I truly stand tall in this world. Meanwhile, inside that black crystal skyscraper in the imperial capital's commercial center, a man was quietly flipping through an intelligence report. It was only when he saw the photo of a figure bathed in lightning that his brow furrowed ever so slightly. The secretary beside him handed over 2 letters, whispering, "These are letters sent by the Li and Song families." The man took them with a blank expression, tore them open without a second thought, and quickly skimmed the contents. These old geezers, they just love their pointless formalities, always preaching about how society is decaying, constantly mourning their lost, old-world elegance. Things that could easily be cleared up with a simple text message, yet they insist on having a postman deliver letters. After finishing them, he casually tossed both letters into the trash can. Just then, an elderly voice echoed from the doorway, "What exactly do the Li and Song families want?" Bai Yan looked up and froze for a second. "Grandpa Chang'an, what are you doing here?" The old man chuckled, "It is not just me. The rest of the elders from the ancestral land are here, too. This matter is simply too big. They could not sit still in the ancestral land any longer." Bai Yan nodded, and stood up to head out, while instructing his secretary to prep the medical equipment in the conference room. Once they stepped out of the office, the old man finally spoke in a grave tone, "Something has happened to the Crimson Dragon." Back then, they turned the Taihang Mountains completely upside down. And now that the Crimson Dragon is in trouble, they are the ones starting to panic. These people have sat high and mighty on their thrones for way too long. This is the very first time they are tasting what it is like to be grabbed by the throat, with their lives no longer in their own hands. Of course they cannot sit still. Bai Yan raised his eyes and asked, "But what does any of this have to do with our Bai family?" The old man froze for a moment, then quickly replied, "The Li and the Song families have been allies with our Bai family for generations. They are hoping to get some help from us." Bai Yan's tone instantly turned ice cold. "My grandfather sacrificed his own life, burying all those old grudges deep in the Taihang Mountains. Before he died, he warned me over and over never to make a catastrophic mistake again. And now, you all still want to get tangled up in this mess?" The old man's face darkened. "Is that how you speak to your elders? The only reason we still let you sit as the head of the Bai family is purely out of respect for your grandfather's sacrifice. Otherwise, with Bai Xiaoxiao's death, and the loss of the absolute sword, counting all these debts against you, did you really think you could still sit so comfortably in that chair?" Bai Yan didn't respond immediately. He just stared coldly into the old man's eyes, and suddenly asked, "Did you forget something?" Back then, it wasn't because you actually wanted me to lead the Bai family. It was because you had absolutely no one else. You had no choice but to pick me. Isn't that right? At this point, his tone had turned completely ice cold. All you care about is awakening and living forever. You couldn't care less about how the younger generation turns out. Every single one of your lazy, useless descendants has relied on me to clean up their pathetic messes behind their backs. These words were like a blade of ice, stabbing ruthlessly right into the old man's heart. Yet, the elder remained absolutely certain that Bai Yan wouldn't dare lay a finger on them. Because the true foundation of the Bai family was never just the one sitting on the throne. It was them, these ancient clan elders who had lived for far too long. They controlled way too much. If necessary, they could even mobilize the military itself. But the very next moment, Bai Yan merely shoved his hands into his pockets, stating with eerie calmness, taking a trip down to the underworld and dragging Grandpa Chang'an back to the world of the living by force really won't do anyone any good. Meanwhile, high above the skies of Shimin City, I sat cross-legged at the very peak of the heavens, bathing in an endless storm of lightning. The aura radiating from my body was utterly terrifying. Ancient golden scriptures floated and intertwined around me. The characters hung in the air like living, breathing creatures. A single, slight tremor from them could shake the entire world. Massive amounts of life force and divine energy were slowly gathering together. I thought for a moment, then suddenly pulled out the bronze cauldron, slamming it directly beneath the lightning tribulation. Countless roaring lightning snakes crashed down from above, completely swallowing the cauldron whole. But the bronze cauldron just shimmered with a brilliant light, emerging completely unscathed. It was way sturdier than I had expected. This makes things even better. I nodded to myself. The energy of the 5 elements. I'm still missing a few of them. Since that's the case, I might as well use the power of this heavenly tribulation to temper the artifact. And while I'm at it, I'll carve my own runic scripts into it, truly forging it into my own personal weapon. The bronze cauldron's energy perfectly resonated with mine, which was exactly why I brought it out for a test run. I originally figured that if it couldn't hold up, I'd just pull it back right away. I never expected it to be this ridiculously solid. Once I survived the tribulation and made my way down the mountain, I casually picked up a newspaper from a corner street stall. Unfolding it, the front page headline screamed in massive, bold letters, "Divine Dragon Spotted in Shimin City." Right beneath the headline was a colored photograph, set against the backdrop of a dark and gloomy sky. Blinding lightning flashed, but the main subject was nothing more than a blurry, dark shadow deep within the storm. Scanning further down, tucked away in the corner of the business section, was a tiny, easily missed line of text. A subsidiary of the Song Group is currently in negotiations with the Lee Corporation. Preliminary product collaboration plans have been established. I folded up the newspaper. A quiet flicker of flame danced from my fingertips, instantly reducing the paper to ash. I muttered slowly to myself, why won't they just accept their fate, and die quietly? At that exact moment, a heavy clap of thunder startled the half-asleep elder awake. He glanced out the window, only to see a torrential downpour raging outside. The sounds of the crashing rain and rolling thunder intertwined. Suddenly, a sharp knock on the door echoed through the room. The old man's heart skipped a beat, instinctively blurting out the words, "Ancestor of the Lee family." But a familiar voice came from the door. It turned out to be just his personal doctor. This made him breathe a slight sigh of relief. Nowadays, most of the clan elders in the ancestral land had gone to the imperial capital, overseeing their respective domains, to discuss how to deal with the Crimson Worm, even willing to swallow their pride and cooperate with the Song family again. Right now, not many people were left guarding the ancestral land. And, since he had been too close to the medium that day and was burned by that eerie purple flame, ever since returning from the Taihang Mountains, his body felt like a deflated husk, his life force draining away rapidly. Just as he was about to order a servant to open the door, he suddenly sensed something was wrong. The places that should have been guarded were now dead silent. Only a chilling draft drifted slowly through the room. The old man's pupils violently shrank. A shrewd man who had lived for a century never left things to chance. He guessed almost instantly that the entity from the Taihang Mountains had arrived. Right the moment he reached out to press the call button, his decaying wrist, frail as a dead branch, was gently pinned down by me. The old man fell silent for a moment, then slowly lowered his hand. He knew that since I had personally shown up at his door. This was his reckoning. There was no hiding from it. I casually pulled up a chair and sat down, giving a faint greeting. "Nice to finally meet you, ancestor of the Lee family." Hearing this, the old man simply said in a calm voice, "You came after all." I chuckled at his words. "But what if I could give you a choice?" The old man's eyelids instantly shot up. "What choice?" he asked. I said in a flat, even tone, "Option 1, you old folks die. And the young ones live. Option 2, the young ones die. And you get to live. How about it? Isn't that a pretty good deal?" The Lee family ancestor remained silent for a long time before slowly replying, "If I have to choose, I choose the first option." I looked at him, smiling slightly. "Why?" But the old man didn't utter another word. He just kept repeating that same phrase. "I choose the first option." Finally, I stood up and left. The hem of my dark robes dragged across the floor. Before leaving, I only dropped one word. "Fine. I respect your choice." The scene shifts to the most bustling downtown area of the imperial capital. Inside a crowded convention center, the Song and Lee families made almost no effort to hide things this time. Completely opening up the venue's entrance, a massive crowd of socialites, journalists, and business elites swarmed in. On the surface, this was a joint business conference, driven by the younger generations of both families. But in reality, deep within the venue, hidden behind layers of heavy security, the ones truly gathering together were those old men who should have died long ago, yet still clung fiercely to their power, refusing to let go. Moreover, the old geezers who showed up this time were even more numerous than the group that went to the Taihang Mountains. Inside the conference room, clan elders were murmuring non-stop. What did the Bai family say? No response. That is the Bai family's turf, after all. It's not easy to plant our informants there, so we are still in the dark about what exactly those old fools in the Bai family are up to. That doesn't make sense. After old man Bai died in Taihang, the Bai family's authority should be in Bai Chentao's hands now. Knowing his temper, there is no way he would just completely wash his hands of this. Honestly, whether the Bai family shows up or not doesn't really matter. Besides, practically all the Awakeners from their bloodline have already been wiped out. If everyone wasn't still so terrified of that crimson worm in the Taihang Mountains, the Bai family would have been swallowed up and picked clean by the rest of us a long time ago. Honestly, it's a real shame. Old man Bai and the peerless sword, Bai Xiaoxiao. If you put those two in today's era, either one of them could easily rule as a king, especially with the peerless sword in that little girl's hands. Its power is pushed to the absolute limit. Just based on that alone, she could easily dominate the entire younger generation. You guys haven't seen it with your own eyes, but the sight of the sky filled with ancient swords raining down slaughter, it's absolutely terrifying. Word has it that someone in the Taihang Mountains actually saw him commanding dozens of blood-red ancient swords, slaughtering everything until the entire mountain range was dripping with blood. Hell, my own grandson died under those very blades. Even his ancient artifact was shattered to pieces. Looking at it like that, not only is that guy terrifying on his own, but he can actually control other people's ancient artifacts at will. At those words, the conference room suddenly fell dead silent for a second. Nobody wanted to keep talking about it, because just the mere thought of that creature sent an instinctive chill down everyone's spine. It felt exactly like having a massive, heavy mountain crushing down on your chest, completely suffocating them. Meanwhile, on the other side of the venue, reporters were holding up their cameras, endlessly flashing pictures of a certain young man. The young guy could only force a polite, yet clearly half-hearted, bitter smile. After all, the people showing up today were all big shots with serious status in society. No matter how incredibly annoyed he was, he still had to put on a respectable front. This young man was none other than Song Zizhou. As the true pillar of the Song family these days, he was actually supposed to be in the hospital. He just wanted to use his recovery time to get a little peace and quiet. But the clan elders still forcefully dragged him out of bed and shoved him right into this meeting. As far as he was concerned, this so-called carefully planned defense these old geezers set up was not only completely boring, but utterly pointless. Because he was one of the very few people who had actually faced that monster from the Taihang Mountains face to face. He knew perfectly well that all these powerful families standing in front of that guy were laughably fragile. They were nothing more than toys in his palm. Honestly, a lot of times, he really just wanted to go straight up to his own families elders, including his own grandfather, and tell them, "Stop struggling, just give up and accept our fate. Because if that thing in the Taihang Mountains truly wanted you dead, then no matter how hard you struggled, you'd only end up changing the way you die." Just at that moment, he caught sight of Li Shishuang. The girl was wearing somewhat mature makeup, with her long hair elegantly braided back, radiating a truly graceful and luxurious vibe. She was the absolute last awakener of her generation in the Li family. Li Shishuang secretly sent him a telepathic message. "I have a really bad feeling about this. If things start going south in a minute, I suggest we make a run for it." Hearing this, Song Zijo looked a little confused. He whispered back, "Everything seems perfectly fine here." But Li Shishuang's expression was deadly serious. "It's raining in the capital. Do you still remember the Taihang Mountains? The heavy rain is his messenger. As long as it's raining, finding this place will be ridiculously easy for him. So we absolutely cannot stay here. The sooner we leave, the safer we'll be." Hearing that, Song Zijo was just about to say something else. But his gaze suddenly froze. Because over in the corner of the venue, he caught sight of a certain silhouette. The man stood there in a black robe with crimson patterns, his whole presence clashing with the city's flashiness around him. Completely out of place, as if sensing someone watching him, I slowly raised my eyes, and gave him a gentle smile. The color instantly drained from Song Zijo's face. He didn't even care about Li Shishuang's confused look. Instead, his voice trembled as he whispered, "There's no point running, he's already here." Li Shishuang followed his gaze, and saw him too. The one standing quietly in the corner. The boy in ancient robes. Her heart instantly dropped, because she knew better than anyone else, when this monster killed people in the Taihang Mountains. It was over in the blink of an eye. Even if you were armed with ancient relics, he would slice through both you and the weapon. She had seen it with her own eyes when her family recovered the relics. The horrific state of the shattered fragments. They were so destroyed that fixing them was absolutely impossible. Thinking of this, she didn't dare to look any longer. She could only pretend that everything was fine and keep socializing, while quietly backing away toward the edge of the room. But as she backed up, she suddenly frowned, because once she expanded her senses, she finally noticed something incredibly bizarre about this place. Gravekeepers. Those things that were supposed to wander in the cracks between hidden history and reality, were actually planted right here in plain sight. They were bizarre creatures without any real consciousness. They specialize in wandering through desolate lands, searching for places rich in spiritual energy, digging up ancient tombs one by one, to unearth the relics and artifacts buried inside. They were meant to be nothing more than tools. Yet now, they had actually been brought into the capital, brought right into this packed venue. To be able to pull this off, meant someone at the clan elder level had to be secretly pulling the strings behind the scenes. The next second, Li Shishuang's face drastically changed, because she heard, the soothing music playing in the room was suddenly mixing with a dark, ancient rhythm. The sound was like a low hum echoing in a void, layer upon layer, as if it was trying to drag your soul right out of your body. And because she had kept her spiritual senses active, she was the first one to realize something was wrong. She immediately grabbed a napkin, and quickly wrote down a few lines with her fingertips. Because this place was already completely engulfed by that deadly, dark energy, normal telepathic messages couldn't possibly reach Song Zijo's ears anymore. This wasn't just a regular trap. It was a massive conspiracy. It was a deadly setup, not just targeting the one from the Taihang Mountains, but everyone in this entire room. Right at that moment, a chilling blade suddenly flashed from behind her. It was a lethal strike meant to kill instantly. Li Shishuang dodged to the side, effortlessly kicking off her high heels. She folded the napkin filled with her message, and with a flick of her finger, shot it out like an arrow. At the exact same time, the old man hiding in the control room watched this happen. He couldn't help but let out a sigh. Such an outstanding youngster, and you're actually willing to throw her away as a sacrifice? Beside him, the elder named Li looked dead cold, not even bothering to bat an eye. Why wouldn't I be? He scoffed. Once we finally witness true immortality, these so-called juniors are nothing more than toys for our amusement. Don't hold back. That thing has been dying to taste blood for a long time now. The music swelled higher and higher, playing what felt like a true symphony of blood. Li Shishuang watched helplessly as the people in the room dropped down, one after another. It's not just their souls being ripped away. Even their lifeblood is draining at a terrifying speed. Those high society elites and rich kids, they don't even have the strength to fight back. They just die silently to this twisted, gloomy melody. Suddenly, a shadow flashes. Another sharp blade slashes straight for Li Shishuang's forehead. At the exact same time, a bronze halberd appears right above her, crashing down with a terrifying killing intent. It's covered in ancient runes. That's actually an ancient artifact, too. In a split second, I appear right beside her, grabbing her shoulder, and launch her entirely out of the way. Then, I shoot my hand up and crush the attacker's throat. With a hard twist of my wrist, crack, his neck snaps. Without missing a beat, I snatch the bronze halberd from his grip and hurl it backward, pinning another shadow assassin dead against the wall. Li Shishuang is pale as a ghost, barely even daring to breathe. She can't even begin to describe this crushing, suffocating pressure. Right then, she suddenly senses someone else behind her. She whips her head around, only to find Song Zizhou, half his body drenched in blood, leaning weakly against the wall with a bitter smile. Li Shishuang can't help but ask me, "Why did you save us?" But Song Zizhou cuts her off immediately. "Don't ask. Truth is, he doesn't understand it either. Who could ever guess what goes on in the mind of a king?" I just look down, watching the wisp of bloody mist slowly curl between my fingers, and mutter, "What a pain." I meant to forcefully intercept one of their life forces just now, but I was a second too late. Because all this blood and soul energy is being rapidly siphoned by something else, building up to forge some unknown, terrifying entity. So, these two young awakened can't die just yet. Meanwhile, in the control room, a man suddenly furrows his brow. "Why the hell is that crimson dragon here?" The old man beside him responds with a dark, heavy tone. "Who knows? This definitely wasn't part of the plan. But whatever, we've gathered enough blood now. Tell the grave diggers to tear open the altar. Once he finally returns to this world, it won't matter if there are any survivors left down there. They're all going to end up as pools of blood anyway." Back in the grand hall, I suddenly hear chanting echoing all around. The voices sound ancient, so incredibly ancient that it's impossible to tell just how many centuries they've survived. From the shadows in every direction, dark figures slowly rise to their feet. Their faces are completely blank. Their mouths mechanically chant over and over. The ancient tongue echoes like massive bells, layering together into a deafening, roaring wave of sound. Then, with an explosive boom, the entire floor of the arena actually begins to cave in. The ground splits wide open beneath our feet, and the whole hall plunges straight into the underground. 3,000 meters below, towering stone pillars reach into an endless, suffocating darkness. But in that pitch-black void, a massive, blood-red eye suddenly rips open in midair. The crimson pupil constantly twists and morphs, finally locking into ancient runes. An ancient scripture slowly reveals itself deep within the depths of that massive eye. An aura from an era long before antiquity floods out from the abyss like a raging tide. Countless mummified corpses plummet from the dark sky above, like a heavy downpour made entirely of the dead. Sickening, crimson energy fills the space, as the giant, evil eye violently trembles in the air. Surging rivers of blood violently rush upward, pouring straight into that ancient scripture. But its main body is bound tight by layers of massive iron chains. With every single struggle, the altar quakes violently in response. I raise my hand and summon my artifact, flipping the sky-bearing cauldron upside down to scoop both Song Zizhou and Li Shishuang safely inside. After all, in this abyss 3,000 meters deep, if it weren't for the ancient artifact protecting them, they would be smashed to pieces the moment they fell. As the river of blood was continuously drained away, the initial madness in that evil eye was gradually suppressed, replaced by a cold and piercing rationality. It slowly narrowed its gaze and began to study me all over again. Eerie flames float around it, forming twisting trails of bizarre, ever-shifting runes. Li Shishuang and Song Zizhou looked pale as ghosts. Just a single trace of the oppressive aura leaking from the evil eye was enough to make their minds nearly collapse. I looked back at the two of them. "Do you know what this thing is?" I asked, just as Song Zizhou was about to speak. A beam of crimson light blasted toward us. Wherever that light passed, corpses were instantly reduced to nothingness. It was so fast, it was almost like teleportation. The bronze cauldron above my head began to spin on its own, radiating boundless life force. Living runic spirits galloped out from the cauldron's surface. The beam crashed violently against the outside of the cauldron, only to be forcefully trampled to pieces by those galloping, ancient phantoms. Song Zijo steadied his nerves, and finally whispered, "We either figure out how the laws of this place work, or we kill the true master of this rift dimension, because this altar only exists by drawing power from the spirit of this evil eye." Before he could even finish his sentence, a sharp crack echoed through the air. One of the heavy chains binding the evil eye snapped in half. The vicious glare in its pupil instantly flared up, and its chilling intellect grew even sharper. I didn't hesitate for another second. I immediately sealed the two of them safely inside the cauldron, planning to deal it a devastating blow before it could completely break free from its bindings. But right at that moment, a twisted, withered hand suddenly grabbed Song Zijo by the ankle. It was actually a corpse that could still move. Its 5 fingers dug in like steel hooks, frantically sucking away his flesh and spirit energy. Crimson scales instantly flared across my neck. I reached out and lunged forward to grab him, but that monstrous hand was already wrapped in a thick, vile aura of blood, spreading straight toward my heaven-bearing cauldron. The ancient runes on the cauldron spun wildly, and several living spirits wreathed in black flames burst outward, incinerating that bloody aura into nothingness. But because the cauldron was moving way too fast, Song Zijo missed his absolute best chance to get inside. Taking advantage of the chaos, the corpse pounced right onto him, surrounded by a surging sea of blood. It completely swallowed him whole. Song Zijo's spiritual energy instantly erupted, and a blinding golden light, laced with ancient magic, blasted right at the corpse. Yet, that skeletal, withered hand forcefully pierced right through his protective barrier. It tore into him so brutally that his entire body was nearly ripped out of shape. I shot forward like a loose arrow, violently ripping apart the vortex of blood. But I was still a split second too late. Right in front of my very eyes, that brutal, twisted resurrection had already begun. Seeing this, I threw all hesitation out the window. I fully awakened every single living spirit within the heaven-bearing cauldron, fully prepared to slaughter this foul monstrosity. The moment the monster locked eyes with me, it let out a low, almost confused whisper. "To think, a great demon of the Yang God realm." Then, as if muttering to itself, it added, "In an era like this, how could a Yang God realm even exist?"